and welcome to Meet Our Ex's Success Stories podcast. I'm coach and host Amanda Leah, and today I'm here with a man who has personally inspired many in our fat burning community with his stunningly effective weight loss. He continues to make a difference as an obesity specialist, healing folks with his medical weight loss program. We're so excited to hear your story, so thanks so much for sharing with us, Dr. Tro Kalayjian.
Yeah, thanks. Tro is fine. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
It's our pleasure. So let's get started. Please tell us about your diet and health before you began your current way of eating.
Yeah, I've been obese my entire life growing up. I remember when I was 8 years old, the first time I knew I had a weight issue was when I was in a winter recital, and I was a little chubby boy, and I was a reindeer running in place, and all my fat was going up and down kind of as I ran. And I remember that moment in lunchtime when they showed the winter recital, and the entire school laughed. So I remember that moment to this day. That's just to give you a taste of how early I remember being it. And then I was overweight for most of my teenage years. I had a bit of reprieve when I did a fasting and vegan diet at the age of 15, and I lost a lot of weight, and that felt great, but overall I didn't feel great. And ultimately I went back to like a just standard American diet as best as I could to be healthy, but I couldn't keep the weight off. I gained 10 to 15 pounds a year for the next 10 years, ultimately went to med school and residency, becoming an attending physician in internal medicine, and I found myself at 350 pounds with joint pain, tired, basically obese my entire life. And I knew that, it was really my wife who inspired me to change. She's like, she knows how to play me. She's like, you're a smart guy. You scored on the 90th percentile on your internal medicine board exam. You trained in the Yale system. You're smart. You diagnose all these people. You can figure it out. Just, why can't you figure out your weight issue? So she really pushed my buttons in the way that, okay, I got to figure this out. I'm pre-diabetic, hypertensive, sleep apnea, joint pain. Got to get my life figured out. And I want to be alive for my 3 kids. And then I opened up the medical, textbooks on nutrition and reviewed them and said low fat, more grains, more fruits, eat multiple small meals. And, I'm thinking, let me go back to the primary literature. I'm an evidence-based doctor. Let me go back to the primary literature. And I went back to the primary literature and, meaning the original studies, the head-to-head studies. That's what you'd want to know if you have if you wanted to use a drug, let's say, you'd want to know, how did that drug do against another drug? If you get an pneumonia, how did one drug do against another drug? You'd want to see the head-to-head trial. So I said, let me start with the head-to-head trials for diets. And then I'm looking at them, and always low carb is doing better. And I'm like, wait a second. Why is low carb doing better in every single diet for weight loss? I thought low fat's the way to go. And so I started scratching. So I started reading more. I read over 1,000 papers. I read over 300 books on nutrition because my wife knows how to play me. Once I start, you can't stop me, especially when it comes to learning. I was always curious, always questioning, always curious. So then then the whole story unravels. Okay, we've essentially been lied to. It's been very biased the way that the data has been presented. And there's a long story of how we got there, but ultimately the truth is there. You can find it. It's just not presented as cleanly as the main thing we were told, which is eat 5 to 7 small meals and eat, whole grains and more fruits, right? And lean meats. So, but the truth is there. You just have to read the data. So I said, okay, let me start. Let me start by lowering my carbs. And I lowered my carbs. And I remember the first day, me and my wife would go out to eat, and we go out to this restaurant, and my wife doesn't really know what I'm doing. She just knows I'm lowering my carbs. And we get to the restaurant, and it's a fine restaurant. The maitre d' comes to take my order, and my wife orders, and of course there's bread on the table, and my wife orders a little salad. She's a petite woman. And then the maitre d' comes, and I say, give me 2 filet mignons and 2 skewers of shrimp, and let me get the meat, appetizer. And his jaw drops, like, you're a 350-pound doctor ordering a ridiculous amount of food. And my wife is like so gently saying, Tro, I thought you were going to diet. Maybe you should think about ordering something else. And I'm like, no, I had a clear vision of what I needed to do to succeed, not to eat the bread on the table, not to eat the mashed potatoes, not to, eat the dessert afterwards. So that started about 5 or 6 years ago. And then along the way, I just started lowering the carbs. That was it. And along the way, met Sean Baker, and he kind of influenced me to go very, very low carbohydrate, and did that and lost 150 pounds. And then along the way, I said, I can't keep doing what I'm doing. So about 3 or 4 years ago, I started thinking I have to get certified in obesity medicine, and I can't practice the same. And so I got certified in obesity medicine, board certification. And for the last 3 years, I've been working in virtually and in a clinic in New York, my clinic, where we focus on diabetes reversal, obesity management, and getting people using approaches that lower carbohydrates, using fasting and time restriction, and supporting them, because not only is it evidence-based, but it's patients love it, and they love it. So that's the story in a nutshell. And that's where I am now.
That's amazing. Wow. Well, I'm sure your clinic's doing amazing work, and way to go, Miss Kalayjian, for getting you into that evidence-based. It's really scary how deeply we've all been deceived with regards to nutrition, especially. So where are you? We'd love to hear right now about your current way of eating. How do you implement your low carb or zero carb now, and fasting?
Yeah. I think that, I don't think I've been over, let's say, 50 to 100 grams of carbs in the last 6 years, or 5 or 6 years. Probably there's some days where there's been long stretches where I've been zero carb, but most days I'm probably somewhere between 0 and 50 grams of carbohydrates. I don't really, track it anymore. And that usually looks like meat, fish, chicken, eggs, Greek yogurt, green leafy vegetables, occasional low carb fruit. And, I got to tell you, my wife's the biggest trigger, so I know you gave her credit, but she has a line of low carb baking mixes. So she, is frequently baking up almond flour cookies and cakes. And so I live in a lion's den, so to speak, appetite wise, but so occasionally I'll have those, but and that's, her name's Rosette, so she's got Rosette's mixes. But and obviously she's my wife. Do I recommend you have them? No, they're like crack. They taste way too good. So but that's the way my diet looks now. I'd say it's probably a heavy base of meat, occasional fruit and vegetable, and that's my diet. And I've never been better. And I generally fast. I'm generally one meal most days, and never been less hungry. I'm never. I'm no hunger whatsoever. Which is how I want it to be.
That's so perfect. Who doesn't want to be unhungry, not hungry most of the time? That's great.
Yeah.
Although being in a lion's den with all those baked goods does sound a little bit challenging, let's say, and delicious.
Yep,
so do you have any thoughts on fat content or dairy or anything about eating the whole animal, like nose to tail? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, they all sound great. If you want dairy fat, have dairy fat. I don't do dairy fat because it makes me more hungry. I don't really do dairy because it makes me more hungry. So they're designed to make an animal eat more, right? It's so I don't do it just because it makes me more hungry. If I want to enjoy my food, I'll put cheese on it or butter. But generally for body composition, I'm not adding fat per se. In terms of the overall fat, it's unique to everybody. There's some people who can do very low fat, very high protein approach. And I know Sean's done that recently and had great body composition results. But at the other end, if you go too low fat, a lot of people can tell me that they don't feel great. They're not able to fast as long. So I think it just comes down to what's working. If you're adding fat and mascarpone and nuts and dairy fat and butter and cheese, everything, and not losing weight, then, hey, let's just reevaluate it and see if we can change the approach and get success for you. Most people, I'd say, are, around the we like to recommend something around 30 to 50% fat for the weight loss phase. And really, if you're in the weight maintenance phase, we don't even, there's no percentage really. And then nose to tail, I like the idea of incorporating organ meat. It's very nutritious. I don't think it's a must. Certainly it's not absolutely necessary. I think theoretically it makes sense. It's very nutritious, right? I've eaten liver maybe 4 or 5 times in the past 4 or 5 years. So I think that, it's you do what works for you. And I think it's quite healthy to eat it. I don't think you should avoid it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, I don't feel strongly when I know that, for example, what's his name? Why am I blanking on his name? Paul Saladino feels very strongly about nose to tail. If it works for him, great. I know Sean doesn't really care about organ meat. If it works for him, great. And ultimately, look, we don't have long-term evidence of any of these diets. So you go and see how you feel and measure your outcomes on your lab work, on your calcium score, on your CIMT when you check your carotid. So, and those are things we all recommend and do here in the office. So, look, we don't have any long-term data on this stuff. So, go based on how you feel and how your health seems on your lab work. And if you're happy with that.
I love what you're saying about that. It's so important to go with how you feel. It seems like you've got a really powerful way of living and eating now that's been working for you well enough for you to go into it and inspire others. And just wondering if you could share a little bit more about how that your way of eating has an impact on you now with your health currently.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest issue for me was I was always hungry, and that led me to being pre-hypertensive and pre-diabetic and having sleep apnea. And, look, I've had an injury recently, and I always loved exercise. I had surgery about 3 or 4 months ago, and I've been out of the gym for 4 months. And yeah, my body composition hasn't, it's not great, but I haven't gained weight. So normally I probably would have gained like 50 pounds. They probably would 5 or 10 pounds a month would have come rushing back. So it's been really great to have my appetite fairly regulated. And when I can't exercise, I don't have to worry about, how many calories I'm taking in. For example, I'm just not hungry and I don't eat. So yeah, I think that it's had impacts even to this day. And look, we have more than 500 patients that we've impacted with low carb, lowering carb and intermittent fasting and time restriction. And we track them with remote monitored scales, remote monitored blood pressure cuffs, and continuous glucose monitors. We're very aggressive with remote monitoring. And we've been that way for 2 or 3 years. And we're here as a support. So to keep them going in this way. Because once you bring the carbohydrate back, the inflammation comes back, the water weight comes back, and a lot of times the hunger comes back. So we really try to evangelize our patients to keep with this lifestyle that worked for them. And I'm also evangelizing myself. So, I really believe that, not to say that low carb is for everybody, but if it works for you, let's do everything we can to keep it that way for you. Of course, we support other people. We've had patients here that are whole food plant-based. We still get them to lower their sugar. We still get them to lower their grains, right? And so we can apply the tenets of what makes low carb unique in reducing liver fat and reversing metabolic disease and improving endothelial function, right? Calorie for calorie, we're able to do that. So any way we can lower the carbohydrate, there's a benefit for hunger and for some of these other measures. So we're very strongly evangelizing and supporting our patients. You don't have to come in. We're watching all the data from home. We will reach out to you, in order to prevent and kind of help you. So we feel very strongly about that.
That's amazing. Again, your story is amazing. The stories of all the patients you're helping, I'm sure, are even more stunning, and we can't wait to hear them all as they come in. So thank you again for coming in to share with us, and feel fab.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.